Good morning and welcome to our UBC Learning Circle Knowledge Transfer and Mentorship with Valerie Lamirande. Today's conversation is presented in partnership with the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. We'd like to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle and allowing us to have these conversations. Before we formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Please feel free to introduce yourselves and the nation you're calling in from in the chat box. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Serene Squawkin. I am Seal Okanagan on my mother's side and Hickory, Apache, and Belgian on my father's side. I will be the moderator for today's discussion. Joining us today working behind the scenes is Cynthia, our production coordinator. She'll be interacting with everyone in the chat. And finally, before we get into today's discussion, I will provide a gentle heads up that the topics covered may be sensitive or emotionally triggering. So please make sure that you're looking after yourself. And if at any point in time you need to talk to an elder, friend, counselor, or family member, don't hesitate to do so. Now I'll turn it over to Valerie to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. As Serene said, my name is Valerie, and my last name is Lamirande, and I am from the Haida Nation. I'm actually from the Raven clan of Skidans, from Skidegate, and I come to you right now from. So, Serene, I'm not sure if we wanted to start slides or just carry with because a lot of my introduction is in the slides. So, as you know, I'm the owner and founder of RavenSong Soap Candle. My Haida name is Slinga Ajada, which means creative girl. And I'm the founder and the creative director of RavenSong Soap Candle. And the next slide, please. So I wanted to at first acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the unceded traditional territory of the Ligwitut people, which has under their umbrella the Wewakai Nation, the Wewakam Nation, and the Quaqua First Nation. And I am grateful to be living, working, and playing on their territory. The next slide, please. So, as I said before, I'm from the ancestral territory of the Haida Nation, and that's where I was born and raised. I stayed up on Haida Gwaii up until I was in high school. And then at the time, we were so remote. Sorry, that word just left me for a minute. We were so remote up on Haida Gwaii, we didn't have high school at the time. So we had to leave the islands to go to high school. And I came down and went to high school at Port Alberni, and that's how I ended up on Vancouver Island, and all of our family kind of ended up here. So I'm really grateful for that. So that's a basic introduction to me in a nutshell. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be covering a lot about the business and how I got into the business as we move forward in the presentation. But I just want to take a moment to also introduce my business, which is RavenSong Soap Candle. RavenSong Soap Candle is a women-owned and an Indigenous-owned business. And I started making soap about 25 years ago. I was chatting earlier with the girls, telling them that I've been making soap and products for about 25 years. And when I first started making soap, I think I was just on a quest to find something that was artistic and creative, and for that outlet that any creative person is looking for. And I was constantly doing all kinds of projects, from photography courses, woodworking courses, macrame, any courses that were going on at North Island College or anything that was offered. I would take the courses looking for that creative outlet that would speak to me. And if you're a creative person, you know how you need that creative outlet for your soul and for everything, just to keep you moving forward. And one day, about 25 years ago, I had hosted a bridal shower for a girlfriend. And a week later, she came to me with this bar of soap. And I remember her coming into my office. At the time, I was in the corporate world. And she came into my office and she gave me this gift, and she opened her hands and showed me this bar of handmade soap that she had made over the weekend. And I remember taking that bar in my hands and going, "You made this?" And she's like, "Yeah, I just had a book my mom gave me for Christmas. And so I just followed the recipe." And so we chatted about it for a bit and decided to try batch together that weekend. Well, I remember making that first batch with her and I will never forget it. And after that, she carried on with doing other little arts and crafts, and making soap for her was just something fun to do once in a while. But from there, I was hooked. And at the same time, I didn't realize that my mom and my stepfather over in Vancouver, my mom is one of our matriarchs in our Haida society, and she lives in Vancouver, but she had just taken a soap making class on a whim at the Friendship Center, the Native Friendship Center, around the same weekend that I was doing my course. So I got on the phone with mom and I was all excited about making soap. And she's like, "Sweetheart, I just made some soap too." And so, long story short, I started traveling to Vancouver and taking soap making classes with my mom. And I liked making soap, like to go up and smell the essential oils or smell the fragrance and go, "What do I want to make? What kind of soap?" Because really, when you think about it, it's such a broad spectrum. And I didn't know where my inspiration was coming from for these bars of soap. And then I remember the first bar of soap I made. When you smell scent and you smell fragrance and that kind of thing, there is something that's very visceral about it. You respond to scent and fragrance in a certain way. And I remember smelling some of them and going, "Oh, this reminds me of this," or reminds me of that on Haida Gwaii, or when we were fishing at, our just different memories were coming back to me as we were smelling the scents. And my mom looked at me and said, "Sweetheart, you've always been a storyteller. I think in another life back in our villages, you were probably a storyteller." And she said, "And I think you should tell your stories through soap." And I thought about that. And to me at first it sounded silly, but as I would kept on making soap, every bar of soap I made, there was an inspiration behind it. There was a story behind it. There was something that took me back, a memory, that kind of thing. So, and that's how my brand for RavenSong Soap began to grow. It was very organic. It just kind of happened. And I always just said, I tell my stories through soap. And then as I would be using that catchphrase, it just naturally came to me that every scent has a story. You must all have that scent that reminds you of your nana or your nani, or some kind of event that has happened in your life. So I just kind of wanted to cover that a little bit for you. Sort of that's where RavenSong started, and that's where I came from, and that's where a lot of my creative ideas and inspiration comes from. So next slide, please. So again, I just wanted to talk a little bit about RavenSong Soap and Candle now that I've told you how we got there. RavenSong is now a full business, and it took me years to realize that I was running a business, not just a fun little arts and crafts studio. And as I told you, I started making soap in my home, in my garage, in my basement. And, we at the time had a fairly small house, and I was starting to take up every closet in the house, and under the beds, I had totes of soap that were curing, that kind of thing. And then I started to, of course, give away all of my soaps. And then people would come back to me and ask if they could buy my soap. And I'm like, "Really? You want to actually pay money for my soap?" And it took me a while to realize that I had something that was valuable. Like even when I would have a shower, I'd realize how nice my product was. So I started to gain confidence, and I started to do markets on the weekend. So I was working full time in the corporate world and doing markets on the weekend and making products at night and stuff like that. And I remember doing the 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, pressing bath bombs in the kitchen and cleaning up, and, going to bed and getting up in the morning and going to work and coming home and doing dinner and starting on product after dinner and working till 1 or 2, and then on the weekend doing markets. And I did that for years. And of course, I was at an age where it was fun, it was exhilarating. Although it was a little bit exhausting on our relationship as well, because whenever my husband would be like, we should go to Victoria for the weekend, or we should plan this, I'm like, I can't, I've got to make soap and I've got this market. And so I just kept on going with RavenSong, and my husband was fully supporting me, and I was doing all the markets. And then I remember one day I was at home and getting ready for one of my biggest markets yet. It was the Philbrook Festival. It was a big show that is juried. You only can be juried into these shows. And I was accepted. And so I had my sister and my niece and my other girlfriend and myself and my assistant soap maker and all of us in the house getting ready for this show. And my husband would come into the kitchen and like, can I just get a cup of coffee? And it's like, no, you can't come in. We're busy. So he said to me when I left for the show, after we loaded up the truck and all the dust had settled, he said, when you come back from this show, I'm going to be out all weekend looking for commercial space for you. When you come back, you're going to unload at your first commercial space. And I thought, he's not going to find one. He's only kidding. So, but he did. And I found my first little commercial space. It was just a tiny little place that I just loved being there. And my assistant and I, we just did markets from there. I didn't have retail yet. And just to kind of move things forward a little quicker, I outgrew that space within 2 or 3 years and moved to another space that was about twice the size. And then during the pandemic, things really took off for me because I was able to stay working because we were okay, what is it called when you're one of those businesses that are crucial. So I was one of those businesses that was able to stay open, and I launched my website. And I really started to recognize around that time and accept and promote myself as an indigenous owned business. Because prior to that, I was just doing crafts and so during the pandemic, things really took off, and I found this new space that I'm at now, which is 3,000 square feet. And it's a very unique space because we do all of our production there. You can see into each production room. You could look through a window and see us making soap. You can look through another window and see us making bath bombs and mooncakes. And you could look through the doors of another room and see me pouring candles. And that's all from the retail space. Then when you look up, you see a mezzanine up top where all of our offices and everything happens. So everything happens in that one space, and it's quite a special space. And so things started to get a little bit bigger than what I had anticipated. So while all this was happening, while I was renovating the space and growing my business, my husband was winding down his business. We owned Strathcona Toyota, which is a Toyota dealership here in town. And we've owned it for 20 years. And my husband was selling it. And we did a successful sale of the business with the intention of me winding down, and we'll start traveling. So here he's winding down, and I'm on this trajectory of taking off. And so my husband's been retired for 2 years now, and now he's working for me, doing all of our books and stuff like that, and slowly helping me. So in all of that, I realized it's time for me to really consider selling RavenSong. There's a few other interesting things that happened along the way, and we've got slides about those too, so I'll tell those a little bit later. But just before the pandemic, I had this little ball of energy come into my studio, and I'd never met her before, and her name is Allie. And she came into my studio and she's like, my family told me about you, and you've just got this amazing business, and I'm not sure which way I want to go yet. I want to start a business. She wanted to become an entrepreneur and get out of the corporate world as well. And and I was like, whoa, I don't know about mentorship or anything like that. And that was my first introduction to Allie. And I remember when she left the studio, my soap maker, I have been training for 10 years, she's standing there, sort of like frozen, looking at the door. And I'm like, holy cow, look at that energy. I says, we've got to harness that energy. I remember saying that to Allie or to my soap maker. And, and then here we are 3 years later, we're business partners. So Ali has bought into RavenSong and we're business partners. And so we're indigenous owned and women owned. As you know, we're on Vancouver Island. And we do cold process soap making, which is the traditional method of soap making. And that is sort of the about us, a little bit of a long way of how we got there and how Ali came into the picture and what kind of business I run here on Vancouver Island. So the next slide, please. So, and this is where I was saying Ali and I have come together and we're growing a very unique business that's even more unique than what it was before. Before I was just soap and making soap. And then from there, I carried on and started to do bath bombs and moon cakes. And very recently, not recently, in the last 4 years, have added candles. So we have quite a luxury line, and I like to consider RavenSong to be what I call an affordable luxury. They're pieces that most everybody can afford to buy, and when you use them, you really feel like you're pampering yourself or a loved one when you give them as gifts. And that's sort of like the level and the platform we want to stay on, because in soap making or other businesses like ours, you can have ones that are more the farmers market level, in the pop-up shop kind of levels, or you have the ones that are more the gift shops and galleries and, a little higher end, a little more luxury. So that's what we're shooting for. And in amongst that, when Ali bought into RavenSong as a business partner, she also owned Bare Essential Oils. And it was such a perfect marriage for us because, of course, I use essential oils in all of my products and I source them from all different places because I'm very fussy about my essential oils and fragrances. And they have to be phthalate free, paraben free, the safety, where they're being sourced. That's a whole other story. But for me, there's a lot of points that I look at when I'm selecting my products. To make my products, I have a theory that in order to make beautiful products, you have to have beautiful ingredients and you have to believe in those ingredients. So when Ali joined me and she was the owner of Bare Essential Oils, it was like, oh my goodness, all of that work is done for me now because I know they've already done that homework and that legwork. So we have married RavenSong Soap and Candle and Bare Essential Oils together. We use all of their stuff, all of their essential oils in our products. And then on top of it, Ali also has another business in town called West Coast Wildflower, which is a gift store. And they carry a lot of our products. So we have a really good crossover in supporting each other and both being business owners. So that's where you start seeing the affordable luxury, the ceremonial approach, us using a lot of indigenous products and the capturing the plant medicines and stuff like that. So next slide, please. So I've already started that story where I was telling you that I started taking classes in Vancouver with my mom. And so I started doing the journey with her and starting to learn some of the Indian medicine applications from my mom. I didn't realize that I was just organically learning them just by her wanting to make a nettle soap and getting some nettle and picking nettle that one of our cousins or aunts or uncles had brought down from Haida Gwaii for a visit. And so mom just started doing the infusions and doing the tea blends and stuff like that. And let's try this and let's try that. And sorry, I thought somebody was here. Oh, there is. So mom had a lot of input. And at the time, I didn't realize how much I was learning from her. We were just playing with stuff. And she would talk about how when she was a little girl, they would go and pick the what we call Indian tea, which is actually Labrador tea, up along the port stretch on the way to Masset. And she would just tell me all these stories. And so I'd be learning with her as I was going along. So, and then the next slide, please. And I've kind of gone through all of how, my whole house was just taken over and stuff like that. And we moved in. I think I probably got ahead of myself in some of the slides. But yeah, so everything, once I moved into my own space, even now in a 3,000 square foot retail and production space, we probably need double the space that we have now. I just keep outgrowing my spaces. So, and you can see just by the soap on the lower right-hand corner, you can see my branding. The raven that is on that brand was designed by Sean Eden Shaw, who is one of my cousins. And when he designed it for me, we decided it would just be a one-time purchase of the logo. At the time, I was the vice president of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild in Canada. And we were really working hard on making sure we had a consistency amongst the soap making crafting industry in Canada, that we had a lot of all the systems in place for our labeling, our compliance and stuff like that. So yeah, I had to sort of set the bar a little bit, and we started working with Health Canada, getting all the compliance and stuff like that. So you could see just a copy of my logo in the lower right corner. We are looking at rebranding right now and having a lot of fun with it, but I just wanted you to kind of notice my brand there in the corner, and that's Simply Lavender Soap. So, and then the next slide, please. So now we're getting into some of what's been going on within my business as it grew, and things that just kind of happened. And every once in a while, because you just put your head down in your work, and every once in a while you put your head up and look around and realize you really are starting to accomplish some things. This one here, the soap that's on the screen now, it's from my Haida Potlatch series, and it is called Spirit Energy. And if you notice the colors, they are the red, black, and white, which are the colors of the Haida Nation. And they have the swirls and the ovoids and stuff like that I have worked really hard to be able to replicate from our Haida art. So the first time I made this Haida Potlatch bar, it took me about 5 years to figure out how to do this pour. It's a pour that a lot of soap makers can say that they've got a pour that is named after them. This one I didn't name after myself, but it is my own specific special pour, and it's hard to replicate. And it took me about 5 years to figure it out and about 2 years to perfect it. But in fact, we are still learning to perfect it now. Every time we try to make sure the blacks are black and the whites are white and the red is the right color red and the scent is right. So this one is called the Haida Potlatch Spirit Energy, and this bar won first place at the International Soap Making Conference in Las Vegas. And so for me, that was like winning the Academy Awards of soap making. We were at this massive conference center in Las Vegas, and there was about 800 soap makers there from around the world. And we had what we called Soapers Showcase, that certain soap makers were invited to enter their soap into. We had to enter it as what we refer to as a naked bar. No labeling, no explanation, nothing. Nobody knew who made it, what the name of it was, what it signified. And it's voted on by a panel of your peers. So all 800 people at the conference voted on all of the soaps that were in the showcase, and RavenSong won first place. So that was quite an exciting event. When you have to stand up and walk across a room of 700 people, clapping and cheering and accept this award, it was really something. And then and so we'll go to the next slide. So from that one bar, we have now what we call the Indigenous Potlatch series. And we have 4 bars, and I'll show you the other 2 as we go through. This one is based on white raven. So one of the things that you'll find when I'm working on a bar of soap, when I'm looking for inspiration, or when something just inspires me, it would be one of our Haida legends, or a place that I visit, or a smell that has really captured my imagination. That's when I go to the drawing board and go, okay, what do I want to design? What do I want the scent notes to be? What's the base note, the middle note, the high note? How is that going to speak to me? And then the colors as well are very important. Unfortunately, in photos, you don't see a lot of any of the sparkle, which I don't do a lot of sparkly soaps. But in this one here in the gray and silvery area, it's got a really beautiful sparkly sheen to it. So this is supposed to be indicative of the raven feathers when the white raven flew through. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the legend of the white raven and how she transformed herself to get into the chief's good graces, because the chief kept the moon in a box and he kept it for himself. And so the white raven wanted to figure out how she could release the moon into the world so all of the world can enjoy the light. And she tricked the chief into falling asleep. And the legend is a lot longer than this, but the long story short was is she managed to release the moon out of the bentwood box that he had it in, and it floated up through the smoke hole and in the longhouse, and she flew out behind it, and her feathers got singed, and that's why she started to turn into the black raven that we know today. So this is the transformation of the white raven. And that's the black singeing on her wings, and the sooting turning her white wings to black. So that's the inspiration. So I'm just kind of giving you guys a bit of a snapshot on how my brain works and how each soap comes about. So the next slide, please. So as I had mentioned earlier that I live in the unceded territory of the Wewakam and the Wewakai people. And if you spend any time on Vancouver Island, you'll notice that their totem poles have different colors. They're more the teals and the greens and the rusty browns and that kind of thing. And because I live, work, and play here, I wanted to show my respect to the territory that I work on. So I created this one called the Salish Sea Thunderbird, which is one of their very, very strong motifs, like ours is eagles and ravens. Theirs is the Thunderbird. And their Thunderbirds were very, very powerful. And it's said that when there was a bad storm coming, the Thunderbird could come and pick up the village and move it to a safer location, which if you look into the history of that, it's probably the relocation of villages and stuff like that during harvesting times and stuff. But it was interesting when I started I always do research into each story and what it meant to the people before I start creating it. And so this one has a scent of cedarwood to celebrate that they also have the sacred cedar. So that's the inspiration behind the Salish Sea Thunderbird. And then the next slide, please. So this is the last one in the series. And as I mentioned to you before, I'm from Skidans, and I'm a raven of Skidans. Skidans is one of the UNESCO heritage sites on South Moresby on Haida Gwaii. I can trace my lineage back to Skidans, and my old nanai, who lived to be 110, was the last living chief of Skidans. After contact and after all of, everybody was dying of smallpox and stuff like that, there was only women left in the villages because all the men were dying as they were trying to get home in the canoes and stuff like that. So my nanai took on the role as the chief and became the last chief of Skidans. And if you go to that village, I went there last summer, you could still visit my nanai's longhouse site. So being a raven of Skidans, I'm very proud of that. And I wanted to create a bar with that in mind. So I ended up using the star anise lavender blend for the scent. And the reason why I went with the anise is I remember going to fishing derbies with my uncles, or going over to our salmon harvesting villages. And there's always that smell that I could never really put a finger on as a child because I didn't know what it was. And as it turns out, it's anise. Whether it's just a piece of anise that is the actual herb, or some anise soap, a lot of hunters and fishermen will keep that in their tackle boxes and their work boxes to wash their hands with, because what it does is it removes the human scent from your hands. So when you're baiting your hooks and setting your traps and stuff like that, it's not going to scare your prey away because there's a human scent on that article that you're trying to capture your food with. So star anise does have that tradition within hunting and gathering that a lot of us aren't aware of. And so this, not only is this a beautiful scent, it also removes the scent of smells from your hands. Like if you've been working with fish, when you're jarring and canning fish and you get that smell on your hands, this kind of soap will help remove that scent. So this is the Raven of Skidans. So this series of four soaps, which UBC, and I have to say thank you to you guys, have bought so many of these from us, these and the full moon soaps. And I don't know if you know, Sarine, that we are having boxes made right now as we speak. They're a beautiful box that is going to elevate this to just another level for gift shops and galleries and for gifting and so forth. Because of course the Haida potlatch, you all probably have a pretty good idea of what potlatches are, but they are about the giving of gifts. And chiefs would give away everything they owned back in the day to prove how powerful they were and how quickly they could rebuild after giving everything away. And everything that's given away is made by the families. So when my cousin had his first potlatch, that was when I launched my potlatch bar, was for that first potlatch. And we gave out 500 bars of this soap at the potlatch, along with thousands of other gifts, but it was nice for me to be able to include that in the potlatch. So that's the story behind the potlatch bars. And then the next slide, please. So this one is the one I was telling you about Dragon's Den. So after I won at the conference, it was just a flurry of activity again, just getting back to work. And I was starting to get wholesale orders and things were really starting to take off for RavenSong. And I got a call one day, and it was from Kevin Harrington's office from Shark Tank. And when I first got the phone call, I thought I was being punked. So I wasn't being as professional and receptive as I should have been. And it was kind of like, yeah, right, So I didn't really take it seriously, and came home and talked to my husband about it and said, I don't know how legitimate this is. And it was interesting because he recognized the name Kevin Harrington. I didn't. Kevin Harrington is one of the original dragons from Dragon's Den. No, actually, it says Dragon's Den on here, but it's actually Shark Tank is who reached out to me. So he was one of the original sharks from Shark Tank. And he's not on anymore, but he comes on as a guest shark once in a while. But who Kevin Harrington is he is the founding father of As Seen on TV, and he owns that. So what he was approaching me for was to launch RavenSong on his spring launch for As Seen on TV. So it sounded really exciting to me, and I just started working with him on that and sending stuff down to Florida. And while all this was going on, I finally said to him, why RavenSong? Like, you're down in Florida on the other coast. I'm up here on Vancouver Island up in Canada. How did you find me? Like, why RavenSong? And his answer was that he has a team of people that just monitor social media and news reports and anything that's percolating up. And and looking interesting. He says, we just find whatever's trending. And then we do research on them. We do sort of an audit, just to, sort of behind the scenes to see if it's a company that we want to work with, that you're legitimate, that you're authentic. And if you pass all of these marks, then we reach out to you to see if you want to work with us. So they wanted to do that launch, and they wanted to fly me down to Florida and meet Bed Beyond and Walmart and all of these massive outlets. And then they were talking about distribution centers and fulfillment centers and moving things to the States. And I started doing, okay, wait, this is getting way too big for me, because I had always visualized RavenSong to be something that would carry on in either, at least within BC, and I wanted it to be employing indigenous people and local people and helping our economy and staying here. And it just sounded like they wanted to take it so much bigger. I wanted RavenSong to be a bit of a legacy, something that I could have left behind. So I finally had to make the tough decision to say no. It's not the vision that I have right now, but thank goodness they left the door open. And for me, it was just another validation that I was going in the right direction. And I was proud of myself after the fact that I said no, that I stuck to my guns, because I have a vision and I know what I want. And I didn't allow this massive corporation to just draw me in and get caught up in that tidal wave. So I'm glad I've stuck to my guns, and and that now Ali and I are partners, and it's moving more in the direction that I wanted it to move. So the Dragon's Den was a fun little journey along the way. So the next slide, please. Selling, or the way I ended up selling RavenSong, is Ali bought in at 51%. We both agreed that I wanted her to be the major shareholder, because I am, as I said, my husband is retired now, and I'm 63 now, and I've got lots of time left, but my husband and I want to travel. And when we say travel, we're talking, going away in the winter and doing African safaris and cruises and like major traveling, and doing that with a business as successful as RavenSong is difficult to do. So when Ali came on board, she brought that energy and that youth and a whole other perspective to RavenSong that I knew we desperately needed. And I knew it wasn't something that I could just hand her the key and say, well, good luck, here's your business, now off we go. So because there's recipes and there's just so much to running a soap making business. So for all of you that are studying all these different business opportunities and stuff, like any business, this one, as it grew, I was surprised how much is involved in running a soap making business, because I do all of my own writing, do all of my own photography, website, marketing, social media, photography, packaging, like when you start thinking of all the aspects and who we have working for us, we've got retail people, we've got production people, we've got shipping people. It's quite a business. And for me to just think, I'm going to hand this to Alyssa and Cody and say, good luck. It's not like selling a clothing store or another small business. There's a lot more to it. So what we decided we would do is I would stay on as a mentor for Ali. And so do the training and the mentorship, and I would stay on for 2 years. So we're 6 months into the 2 years, and we've got 18 months left. And then Ali will buy me at 100%. And we'll see where she's at in that process and how comfortable she is in her team building, and whether I'm just going to, drop in and say hi every once in a while, or whether I'm going to want to stay on as a creative director in a certain capacity. So we're just figuring that out as we go. But the mentorship and the training has been invaluable. And we can't believe that we're already 6 months into it. And Ali jokes around that she'll be pushing me around in a wheelchair saying, almost done, Auntie Val, we're almost there. But Yeah, so we're really enjoying the path that we're on, and we have 18 months to go on this, and we'll see where we go from there. So, and then the next slide, please. So this is another one of my collections. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of introducing you guys to some of our business concepts and our mentoring program and so forth, as well as the products, so you get an idea of where my inspiration and stuff comes from, because the whole business is built on these products. I remember sitting on the beach in Haida Gwaii, and it was after it was during my cousin's potlatch, because we'd go to the carving shed at night because they were carving a big totem pole that was going to be raised during the ceremonies. So we'd go hang out at the carving shed at night. And I was walking down the beach with my husband, and we just sat on a log, and the moon was coming up at the time, and it was just massive in the night sky, and it was just gorgeous. And so I was talking about different moons and what they meant to the First Nations people and how it was our calendar. And just as I was saying it, I knew I was getting into my storytelling, and my husband kind of loves listening to that. And just when I said it, he said it at the same time, where I said, I should try to make a soap. And he said at the same time, you should make a soap. So the whole time I was at home, I was thinking, at home on Haida Gwaii, I was thinking, how am I going to make this full moon soap? So I came home and started dabbling with different embeds and stuff like that. And after 3 or 4 trial runs and different molds and different embed molds, this is what I've come up with. And this is called the RavenSong Full Moon Collection. So as you see, I've got every moon that we have, and each moon has a different name, like January wolf moon, February cold moon. So what I've done is I've gone and I've done the research on what that moon meant. So the full moon series, as I said, it was inspired by watching a full moon rise on Haida Gwaii and just how beautiful it was. So then I did the research for each moon and what they meant. And then I started to research the essential oils that I would use for each moon. So every full moon series has a different color moon. Like the April pink moon, of course, as you imagine, would have more of a pink tones. Any of the winter moons have the blues and the purples and the blacks and stuff swirled in. And then, like say the January wolf moon, I use a different essential oil blend than I do for this one. The one you're looking at on the screen is called the December cold moon. And that one, of course, is called the December cold moon because that's when, the nights are the longest and it's cold. And this one I scented with frankincense and myrrh with a touch of cedarwood. So I wanted to have those beautiful essential oils that are from the season as well, with the frankincense and myrrh. And then I swirled gold into the top of this one. So frankincense and myrrh and gold for the 3 wise men. And the essential oil blend, I named it the 3 wise men. And so every moon is different with a different essential oil blend and a different color. So a lot of people buy these almost as birthstone kind of things, as well as, just a beautiful soap for that month. So that this series and this collection won first place at the Canadian conference in Banff. So that's the full moon collection. And and the other thing, we only make these on the day of the full moon. It's getting harder and harder because now we have to make bigger batches and bigger batches. So it's usually a 3-4 day stint right around that full moon. So long as we're making them during the full moon, we're happy. But it is one of our most popular. It's made from activated charcoal. So if you ever see black in our soap, it is activated charcoal. It's not a stain or a dye, so it won't stain your countertops or anything. It's really good detoxifying, deodorizing, and it's just a beautiful bar as well as being a really high-end detoxifying, deodorizing bar. So, okay, and then the next slide, please. So from the full moon, I was telling you how with my mom, she would always tell me about different medicines, and we would start using some of the teas and some of the medicines and infuse them into our soap. So I started getting really serious about it again about 6, 7 years ago, and I started doing harvesting and gathering. And one of the favorite ones that I do this time of year is dandelions. I don't know if you guys look at dandelions the way I do. I see a field of dandelions and I just want to get out there and pick dandelions. And we dry trays and trays of dandelions, and then we stuff them into these big, massive jars, and then we let them infuse in the sun for like 2 weeks at a time. And then we strain the dandelions out of it, and you have this beautiful golden oil that has this really rich scent. And as you know, that if you just took that oil and massaged it into your hands, it's healing. It has pain benefits. It's just a beautiful product like that. But then we use that oil and make soap. We do the same thing with seaweed. So this one here is our seaweed spa bar, and you'll see a lot of the write-ups. You'll know from my brand has the tagline, "Every scent tells a story." So on the back of every single bar of soap, you'll find the story of that soap, whether it's the full moon soap and what that meant to the First Nations people and the inspiration behind the essential oils. I'll also tell the story of how this indigenous medicine benefited our people and how I'm using it in the soap today. So that's what the write-ups are on the left. So this one is the seaweed spa bar. Then the next slide, please. This one is Sacred Devils Club. This one I haven't harvested myself yet because I'm not in my territory. And I'm very respectful of how and when things are harvested and when I am gifted Indian or indigenous medicine, that I use it and respect it. So I've harvested Devil's Club at home on Haida Gwaii, but I haven't here, but I've been gifted it enough to be able to make the Sacred Devil's Club soap. This one here is one of our best sellers. And as you know, different Indigenous and First Nations people use the different parts of Devil's Club for different reasons. And the part that we use is we use it infused in oil. And once it's been infused in oil like that, it's believed to relieve pain, soothe inflammation, any of those kind of things. So whenever people come to me with, I've got any kind of inflammatory skin issues or anything like that, I recommend either the Devil's Club dandelion or nettle bar. And so these ones also have this one has the sacred oils of cedarwood, sage, birch, and palo santo. So all of these bars, I've kind of moved away from the really pretty swirls and the bright colors and stuff because I wanted the indigenous medicines to speak for itself. And this series of two, after we launch the Potlatch series boxes, we're going to be having these ones boxed as well. So the next slide, please. So marshmallow and honey is actually my very first indigenous medicine bar, and some of you may not be familiar with marshmallow root being used as indigenous medicine, but it just looks like a dried up fern root is what it looks like. And we bruise it, pound it up and bruise it, then infuse it in oil, and then from the marshmallow leaf we do a tea. And then the brown parts of it I've done with, I just call it Indian tea because that's what I grew up with it being called my whole life. It's Labrador tea. That's right. Thank you. So we do a Labrador tea, marshmallow root, marshmallow tea in this bar. And this one is scented with rose, geranium, ylang ylang, and cedarwood. So this one here has always been one of the most popular bars for psoriasis, eczema, anything like that. That being said, In order to be compliant with Health Canada, I have to be very careful on how I label any of these because I can't make any medical claims. I can't claim that it heals this or cures that or anything like that. So we have to use words like it is believed to, or it is that kind of thing. So I'm careful not to say it cures this or, but if you do have inflammatory skin issues, I recommend this. So that's kind of how we work around that. And then the next slide, please. This is the dandelion and clay, the one I was saying that we go out and pick the dandelions and do the infusion. And this one, once we have some of the dried dandelion, I make a dandelion dust and we also swirl that through it to give it a bit of an exfoliation as well as getting a little more benefit from the medicine. And this one, whenever I do the indigenous bars, I also use buffalo milk in all of these bars. Buffalo milk, of course, is harder to source. It's more expensive, but it's a richer milk than any of the milks you get from any other bovine. It's like goat's milk, where it's very, very close to the breakdown and makeup of human milk, more so than cow's milk. Cow's milk is so far away from our milk, it's not even crazy. Goat's milk is at least close, and so is buffalo milk. But buffalo milk is a lot richer. When you skim buffalo milk, it's just like cream. So we use buffalo milk in all of our indigenous bars too. So it's got a little bit more lather, a little bit creamier, just a little bit more decadence. Okay, and the next slide, please. And this one is saying the seaweed bar on there, but when the photographer took the photo, they forgot to switch the label. This one here is the purifying nettle, and you could see where I've ground up the nettle leaf and put it in there too. So this has got a nettle tea, an infused nettle oil, and then we grind up what we had infused and put it into the bar, and that's where the little freckles come from. It's a beautiful bar and a beautiful green. And this one, I don't have the essential oil listed on it, but I believe this one is cedarwood birch. Can't remember the last one. I know it's got birch in it because birch doesn't behave in soap until you, yeah. So anyway, it's a beautiful bar, and that's the purifying nettle soap. Okay, and then next slide, please. So another thing that I have done through my journey as a soap maker is whenever I travel, I always look for ingredients that inspire me. For example, I was in Italy one time, and I was in this little hill town in Italy, and in a little hill town called Orvieto. And I was walking down this little cobblestone street, and there was this lady sitting outside her door catching a little bit of a breeze, and she was spinning silk with one of those old machines. And of course, I was like, oh, I've got to go talk to her. So her English was very broken. My Italian was very non-existent, but we managed to communicate a little bit. She raised her own silkworms and collected and spun her own silk. And then she took the silk and hand dyed it with vegetable dyes. Like she would get beetroot from her garden and crush it up and dye this. And she was explaining how she, and I was like, oh my gosh, this just spoke to me. So I bought one of her scarves, and it was this beautiful buttery soft scarf that she knitted from this wool that she spun. And when she gave me the bag, there was a little puff ball of the extra silk left, and she stapled it to the bag. We got on our bus to get back down the hill. It was this big hill thing that we had to get, and I'm looking at the silk, and my husband's just kind of like, oh, you're buying a scarf in Italy, and he thought it was just kind of silly. And I said, do you know what I'm going to do with this? And he's like, what? And I said, I'm going to make soap. And he's like, you're crazy. So I get home, and the way you make silk, add silk to soap, is you usually buy it as a raw silk and you add it to lye, and it melts in the lye. And then when you make soap out of it, you have silk in your soap, and it makes it really silky and lathery. So what I did is I took that little cotton ball and I weighed it, just for how many grams it was and calculated how much soap I could make from it. And I cut the tassels off each end of my scarf and to add a little bit more. So I made this soap, and the way I scented it was with essential oils from Italy, like the lemon and the orange and all of the essential oils that you would find in that region. And that's what I scented it with. And the scarf I bought was this teal blue and light green. So I did teal blue and light green swirls through the soap, and I called it Italian silk. And it was just a beautiful bar. And that was the beginning of a journey of whenever I traveled somewhere, I'd always bring an ingredient home that inspired me from that region. For example, I just came home from Tahiti and I brought home a bunch of their vanilla beans. And I've got those infusing right now in a jar of oil. And I'm going to make vanilla Tahitian soap. When I come home from Hawaii, I always bring home honey and lavender because those are two big products in Hawaii. And I always make a honey lavender soap. When I came back from Croatia, I made lavender and salt soaps because salt soaps are really popular. So that's just an idea of things that I do. But when I went to Japan, in Japan, they have these moon ceremonies and they press these moon cakes there, and they're kind of a gummy cake with a bean curd filling, and they come in all these beautiful shapes. So if you look on the screen, you can see I've got this one here that is our soapberry ice cream scented moon cake. And these moon cakes are I don't think there's any other makers that make these moon cakes the way we do. They float on top of the water and do these beautiful patterns and designs and stuff like that. So when I was in Japan and I would see the way they'd make these moon cakes, they'd put them into these little presses and then press down on the dough, and then they would bake them. And I'm watching them going, I wonder if I could press a bath bomb with that thing. So I bought a couple of these things and brought them home from Japan, started using them, and it took probably 2 or 3 months before we came up with the right formula. And then finding the right molds. And so we started ordering all the molds from Alibaba and stuff like that. And so now the mooncakes is one of our signature products and one of our most popular. So that's just an idea of what I do when I'm traveling and where I get inspiration. And then the next slide, please. So this with RavenSong, like I have been saying all along, it's all about my storytelling and traditions. And it's just that knowing that when you pick up a bar of soap, I hope that my bar of soap would transport you somewhere or give you good memories or just have that feel good moment of, or that, what does that remind me of? Just any of those feelings. I want my soap to have that emotional reaction as opposed to just something you're buying to wash your body with. So I hope you have all learned a little bit from me about RavenSong Soap and Candle and the mentorship journey that I've been on with the training and stuff. I hope I've covered enough time or not gone too long. But if you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them.
You did so amazing. I could hear you talk all day.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I just love the way you see the world. It's very cool and fun and creative. And I see why you have the name Creative Woman, because it just you you see so much that I want to see through your eyes, and I know we've been buying your soap for our gifts for our different presenters, and everyone's always raving about them. I know when we first started, you mentioned, and also just like being here, we did the Moon collection and also the Potlatch series, and we've just recently got Couch and Sweater, and that's my personal favorite. It just smells so good. Something about it, it smells like I want to have it on my like the candle. I love it, and then the soap, I love it too. I actually just used it today, and It's so amazing, and I love just hearing about how much goes into it. I feel like sometimes um when people create something, they don't think about how it's making it their own, like and I like how you've made this very intentional and thought-provoking, and it like goes beyond just like the soap. There's a story, there's different properties that the soap can help with, different things that people may need, and I love it. So we have tons of great questions that I'll just ask you. So throughout your journey, who was your biggest support?
I have to say my biggest support has been my husband. And it's when sometimes I get emotional about it when I think about his support because it's been so all encompassing, so very absorbing for me. And so he literally loses me to that creative process once in a while, and for him to kind of just step back and let me do it, or coming and setting up, he's a an executive. He owns Toyota dealerships, and he's selling soap at a market for me, just helping me set up. And he's the one that came to me when I put my notice in, and he said, I remember coming home one day after a market and him saying, "Sweetie, I think we have to talk. Like, you're just burning yourself out working and doing these markets in the soap." And I thought he was going to say, "I think you should just let the soap go for a while." And he said, "I think it's time to put your notice in and focus on this full time." He's the one that has helped me through the tears when I have had the tough times. And so it's been mostly my husband, and then the rest of my family. My sister was always there. I look back at pictures. She was at every market. And I remember when I was so broke, I couldn't even buy my own products. She would let me use her credit card, to buy coconut oil and, stuff like that. So it was tough at the beginning and having family there. So it was mostly my family that was my biggest support for sure, especially my husband. Yeah.
That's so great. Definitely, a community can help create such awesome projects and awesome businesses. And I love to hear that there's such a great support from your family. Our next question is, what's your favorite soap?
I have to say that one that I reach for the most, the two I reach for the most are the Haida Potlatch Spirit Energy and the Oatmeal Milk and Honey, which we're now renaming Breakfast on the Boat. I'm going back to that original. Reminds me of being on the boat with my uncle when you would get up in the morning and just having all those smells. And so breakfast on the boat, it's lightly exfoliating, it's moisturizing, it's pure goat's milk. It's a beautiful bar. And then the Haida Potlatch Spirit Energy, because it's such a gentle scent and it's got just the right amount of clays that it's purifying and cleansing and just feels really good on your skin. And in the summer, I reach for lemon poppy seed, but asking a favorite soap is like asking what your favorite Beatles song is. It's sort of like depends on your mood or what you're doing, or but those ones I have to say I do reach for more often than not. And Cowichan Sweater is up there too. The latest favorite is new. I don't know if you've smelled it yet. It's called Fern Woman.
Huh.
It's
I'll have to
gorgeous.
next next time I see you guys, I'll have to smell that one.
Yeah, so that's a nice one.
Yes. And then do you have any soaps that will help with like postpartum or like a maternity collection for breastfeeding, or like a baby soap that you would recommend for any people that are looking?
Postpartum, there are a few that you could use, but when it comes to anything to do with maternity and nursing or nursery, I always refer mothers and mothers to be to their physician because we do use essential oils in our bars. So a lot of them we don't. We use, and those are the ones I'd say you could use anytime, like the goat's milk, oatmeal, and honey is a really gentle one. But any of the essential oil ones, I do ask moms and moms to check with their doctor. and right on the label, we've got in the warning part, don't use while pregnant or breastfeeding. And I would say 99% of the time, a doctor says it's safe, but I'd always lean to the safe side. But for postpartum, depending on what your postpartum needs are, if you need uplifting or if you need moisturizing, all of those would be different questions that I would ask for what your needs are as postpartum. But we don't have a line that is specifically for moms and moms to be. But I would lean towards more the indigenous medicines because they're the gentle essential oils with a lot of really high-end oils. Yeah.
Thank you. And then our next question is, can I ask what the carrier oil that you use for those infusions and what do you source it? Oh, sorry, not where do you source it from?
So I prefer using apricot kernel oil for most of my infusions, and that's for several reasons. Number one, it's one of the lightest oils. So the viscosity is light enough that it can do a lot of absorbing. It is also a low rancidity oil. Like there's a lot of oils that have a high rancidity rate, like sunflower oil and hemp oils. Those ones, if you leave them on your shelf for like 2 months and you smell them, they're like, oh, they don't smell very good. Those are what I refer to as high rancidity. Again, I'm going back to the beautiful ingredients make beautiful products. So I like to start with a higher end oil. Unfortunately, a lot of soap makers like to go with the lower end oils, thinking because they're making soap they can. But I find I can smell a bar of soap a year later from those lower end oils, and I could smell that some of the oils are going rancid. It's probably still fine in a bar of soap, but it doesn't have that really nice fresh scent. Whereas apricot kernel oil has a really low rancidity rate, really long shelf life, and it's a nice light oil. So I do all of my infusions in apricot kernel. And we are also moving towards our massage rollers and stuff like that to be all apricot kernel. Yeah. One other thing I was going to say, Sarah, about the apricot kernel oil is it's also not a nut oil. Like I really like almond oil, but with almond oil, we have to say that it contains nut oils. And anybody with nut
Mm.
allergies has to be cautious of that, whereas apricot kernel oil comes from a kernel, so it's not a nut oil.
Oh, that's good to know. I know the that allergy can be really challenging for some people. So it's good to know that the apricot one is good. Did you get the question in the chat? That it's what's the best for eczema?
Oh, sorry, I did see that there.
No
The
worries.
For eczema, I always refer people to my marshmallow or nettle bars. Because they have the indigenous medicine that's good for anti-inflammatory issues.
Hmm.
And so we also do a cream called marshmallow cream and a nettle cream, but those we've discontinued because we're reformulating it right now. But those soaps, any of the indigenous medicine
Hmm.
bars would be great for eczema.
Oh, great. And then the next question is, are there brick and mortar stores for Vancouver or Victoria?
So at the moment, we are not planning on opening any brick and mortar ourselves, but we are aligning ourselves with a company called Makers. Are you familiar with them?
No.
They so Makers is a store. There's a couple different kinds of the one that we work with is Makers. There's one in Park Royal, there's one in Metro Town, there's one in Gastown, there's one out in Richmond. And they're just these stores that are in these higher end malls. And you have to be juried in, you have to be accepted. Then you just buy a shelf space from them and they stock it and sell your products. So we are in the one in Richmond and one in Park Royal right now, and we're going to be in one in Victoria. There's one on Government Street that we've applied for, but we're waiting for space there. So that's as close as we'd come to brick and mortar, but we also do have a lot of wholesalers, like even at the UBC, the Museum of Anthropology gift shop carries our stuff, the art gallery, Bill Reed Gallery. So we more have wholesale partners up and down the lower mainland, but for the bigger stores would be makers in Victoria and Vancouver.
Great. One question that comes to mind that I'm thinking of, there's a shop here in Penticton that they have a lot of indigenous products, but also just other products. So if they were interested or other businesses were interested in selling your soap, what process do you guys take to help support that?
So you would send a request through the website to info@ravensongsoap.com. And then we just ask a couple of questions about your shop. And then we send you the catalog with our terms and conditions for minimum orders and what's expected of you as a stockist. And if you're happy with that, then we just accept your order and start shipping. As our wholesale partnership list grows, we are going to have to start getting a little more discerning about who we allow to be stockists for RavenSong. And we are moving and leaning towards more indigenous style gift shops that have some connection somehow. And of course, the higher end gift shops and galleries.
Mhm. That's good to know. And got a few more questions here. What are some tips and tricks you could give for someone who is just starting out and thinking about starting their own business?
I would say find your mentor. And when I say find your mentor, that might even be a Facebook page or a group. When I first started, in retrospect, when I look back at my journey, my Facebook pages and my online pages were invaluable. And participating in those is, even if you don't have a question, if somebody has a question, you know, answer it if you've got some answers and participate in on that page, because when it comes time for you to ask a question, if you're one of those people that are answering and participating, you really get some good support. And I'm still friends. Like, I'll go to a show. I went to one at Christmas time. In Victoria, I did a show, and there was like 4 or 5 vendors there that were like, "Oh my God, Valerie," because we were such good friends back at the beginning and would share all of our problems and successes and everything. So finding your mentorship and your community, whether it's going to classes or participating in online Facebook or any of those groups, watching YouTube videos. Oh my gosh, I go down the YouTube video rabbit hole to this day, still learning different techniques and always trying to stay current. Don't just learn your craft and stay in that bubble. You have to realize that craft is always moving. I'm not sure if that answers your question. That's just kind of the support to look for at the beginning of your journey. And don't be afraid to ask the questions, especially if you're participating in those groups, and take classes and take notes. When you have a success, write it down, whether it's a recipe or how you did something, because do you know what? If you think you're going to remember it 2 months later, you don't. So write everything down, take classes, watch videos, and read. Just have that passion, because if you've got the passion, it shows in your final output. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I like that you're still further seeking community and creating community amongst other entrepreneurs that are starting out, and really good tips for writing things down. I know that's a one that we always are like, oh, I'll remember it. So it's good to know that we probably should write it down.
Well, also when you go back to revisit it, like I come across my notebooks, like got notebooks that are filled, like this. And we all have them. I've
Yeah.
got my notes beside me and they pile up. And every once in a while, when we're going through a cleaning out culling session, my husband would be like, "Do you need these?" And I'm like, and I'll start flipping through. It's like, oh my gosh, I forgot, even notes, call so and so, or, I forgot that's where I got that mold, just from that phone number and that name, just going back and revisiting. So writing it down is almost like journalizing or diarizing. You don't even realize it. And flipping back through your old notebooks and journals is always fun. So it's humbling and also, um, it gives you that incentive and that creativity again. I just love going back through old journals, seeing what I was doing, whether it was when I was taking Japanese lessons, I'm writing everything in Japanese. And, the next phase was studying the moons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to journalize and keep track. Yeah.
I like how you are saying that act of self-reflection and looking back on the journey and the process. And I feel like that isn't also a connection to our indigenous culture, whereas a lot of our people would do that, whether that be out on the land or amongst community. So it's cool that you're still incorporating that indigenous knowledge with throughout your process and your business and whatnot. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then we have one more or actually two more questions. I have one that just popped up in my head. What is some advice that you could give someone who is starting to be a mentor?
One of the things that you have to remember when you're a mentor is that you do have to be there and you do have to show up. So it's a commitment. So you have to make sure you're fully committed to that first. When you are becoming a mentor, like I said, when Allie first blew through my studio the first time, I was like, holy cow, she has so much energy. Being a mentor, you have to make sure that both of your energies and your value systems and stuff do match. So finding a little bit more out about each other, it's like being good friends or best friends. You have to be compatible. You have to have the same value systems. uh, there was a lot of things I considered in being Allie's mentor, as well as becoming a business partner with her, and making sure all of those things were aligned before you jump in, because you don't want to commit to somebody and say you're going to help them along this journey, and then find out you don't really, not so much like each other, but your values aren't lining up, or your work ethics are so totally different that you just can't seem to get on the same page. And it's not that it's this big thing where you have to kind of interview each other, but you kind of know when you first meet somebody that you're going to click a little bit. But make sure you get to know somebody a little bit before you commit to mentoring them, because it would, not only are you not going to be helpful to them if you find you're not on the same page in a lot of different values and stuff like that, it's also going to be stressful for both of you, and it turns into a non-productive thing if you spend more time trying to figure each other out than figure out the direction that you're going. So not every partnership is going to be perfect, but you at least want to still have the same value systems, the same energy. That would be my biggest, having that foundation first before you jump into the rest of it. Then the rest comes naturally if they're passionate about if they're picking up what you're putting down, then you're in good shape. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that. And then the question that popped up in my head is I just know my homelands has a lot of rich plants and medicines and whatnot within my territory in the Okanagan. I'm just wondering, have you ever thought of different lines within different territories? Like I know you get a lot of inspiration from your travels. Do you ever do local travels within BC? Like first things that's coming to my mind is like huckleberries and balsam root flowers. I think that's the name of it. We call it sunflowers, but I think it's called balsam root. And then sorry, And those are the two that come to mind that are, I think, Okanagan specific, but I don't think huckleberries are, but like the balsam. Yeah. Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you have
No, I
any?
see what you mean though, because in every territory there is something that they use, like even with us talking about soap berries and so forth. And I've never really done anything with huckleberries. They are very prolific on Haida Gwaii, and I have looked for fragrances and stuff that can kind of give you that huckleberry feel.
Mhm.
But what I would do, and if I was in that local area, is find something that is medicinal. One thing that I do bring back from all my travels, whether it's within BC or in Europe or Hawaii or anywhere like that, is honey, local honeys. I'm not sure if you know that how medicinal local honey can be for somebody that has allergies or hay fever, that kind of thing. But if you are treating yourself for that issue, you have to be using local honey. Like you can't be using honey from Hawaii to be helping you out with your local allergies, that kind of thing. So those are the ones that I gravitate to. It seems like everywhere in BC has lavender, everywhere in BC has honey. But if I was, say, going to go to Cowichan, and I would try to meet with a local elder to find out what their medicines are. And the thing you would look for is how would you incorporate it? Would be an infusion, or would it be through tea? Is it going to have any benefits and properties that it's going to bring to the soap, or is it more just label value? But label value does have a lot of value, even if it's not giving you a medicinal value, because soap being a wash off product, when I say it's a wash off, it's not a leave on product like you're leaving a cream or lotion on your skin where it has more of a benefit, whereas a wash off product is just washing off, so it's giving you a very surface benefit, but still helps because you do it every day. But I haven't done any, I've done ingredients from Haida Gwaii. I do them from Vancouver area, from Vancouver Island, and wherever I travel. But I admittedly haven't done it in any other bands within BC, which would be interesting. Sort of like one of those chefs that travels around to all the different villages and cooks with the local ingredients. That would be an interesting thing to try. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a different avenue is doing a little YouTube page where you're going into different territories.
Yeah, that would be fun. What is
Maybe
that one
I
called?
might have
Moose Meat
been
and
lagging
Marmalade? Do you
there.
ever watch that show?
Yeah.
They're cooking all over the place in all the different.
I think I caught it from that. Yeah, yeah.
That's a good show.
Yeah, you can do soap making. That would be so
Yeah,
cool. We'll call up
instead of
APTN.
we have a new show for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go do cosmetic medicines with First
Yeah.
Nation fans.
Yes.
There you go. You can start a whole new
Oh
thing.
yeah, you're already on it. I love. Yeah. Yeah, you'll be my first customer. Um, so that was the last question on our list. Do you have any closing remarks and words for our audience?
No, just thank you all for listening for this long,
Oh,
and I hope I was able to give you some ideas and inspirations, and I hope you all go forth and do creative things.
yes,
So thank
that's
you.
great. Great
Hawa.
advice. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing everyone at our next learning circle. Lim Lim, thank you.
Hawa. Bye-bye.